Welcome, everybody. Good to be with you tonight. Welcome to Bridging the Gap with Digital Dentures, Making the Clear Choice. My name is Gene Peterson, and I'll be your host for the next hour or 50 minutes and hopefully we can have some fun together and talk about digital dentures. Let's go ahead and get started. So as a matter of disclosure, my name is Gene Peterson. I'm a dental technician. I'm the Director of Technical Development and Learning for Stern Gold in Attleboro, Massachusetts. If you have any questions, go ahead and submit them in the question box down below, and we're going to get to those at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So, today everything's going digital. We know that. We go to shows now that we're going back to shows again, and we see the booths and everything seems to be digital one way or the other. I don't really believe it's going digital. It's gone digital. It really has. I mean, we're up and running. The train's going down the road, and unless we're going to get on it, it's probably too late because, well, I shouldn't say it's too late, but it's time to get on it now because the farther it goes down, the further we're going to get behind. There's so many good things about digital in all aspects of dentistry, specifically in laboratory technology. And tonight we're going to talk about removable. It's such an evolving field, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to talk about it. It's changing on a daily basis. It's seriously changing so fast, it's hard to keep up with. And we're going to talk about that. So the first question I have for us tonight is why do we want to go digital? We understand that digital workflows are streamlined usually. They help us out. They give us more time to do other things. We know that there's accuracy involved. We know that there is predictability and repeatability involved with digital because there's no human factor per se in those workflows. Increased efficiency comes along with those former qualities. And the goals that we have, we want to make things faster. For our laboratories, for our practices, we want to make things easier. We want to be able to make them affordable because at the end of the day, we're trying to make money. The digital revolution is something that really started many, many years ago. I mean, it started back in 1985, if you really want to take it way back, and even farther than that. But I remember when the first CEREC machine came out in America in the early 90s, and doing beta testing on that, and seeing how far it's come and how long it took that to become state of the art or standard of care. Because that first CEREC machine, it was a bad temporary machine at best, and it's come so far. Now we do crown and bridge all day long with it, and it really is great technology, and it's something that's here to stay, and it's really changed the way we do dentistry, and especially now because the way things have moved forward in technology over the years and how it multiplies and it just exponentially grows on a daily basis. Who knows where it's going to take it? So the revolution really is here, and it's evolving. It's changing on a daily basis. It's so fast. So tonight's takeaway, we're going to talk about where did digital dentures come from, and we're going to talk about today's digital denture and bridging the gap for the name of the course. We're going to talk about digital dental workflows, how to ensure success, talking about how it's all about the records. We're going to talk about communication and information, the digital setup, and finally materials. Now this is an introductory course to digital dentures. Maybe you've done some digital dentures, maybe you haven't. Maybe you've done some digital in your labs, your offices. We're not going to dig deep into the weeds into any of these subjects. We're going to talk about them kind of on an introductory level, kind of superficially, so you can get an idea and familiarize yourself with the concepts and understand that there is some good to bring across that bridge into your current lives, because all those things that we learned, all those basics, they still apply. Everything is still based on what the fundamental principles of dentistry are, and I'm going to try to help you understand a little bit about that as far as removable is concerned tonight. But it is an exciting field to understand and to get into the weeds a little bit and understand where those connections are made, because some of the people have a hard time going digital. Fewer now. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it was harder for somebody to imagine going digital, but now it's becoming a little bit more easy to make that leap, if you want to call it that. So the journey begins, and I do call it a journey because going from conventional to digital in any aspect of your practice or your laboratory can be a scary thing. So let's talk about digital denture revolution. So how did digital dentures really start? Back in the mid-90s, Miyata and Kawada, they came out with some preliminary studies that basically said, yes, we can conceptually create a digital arrangement of teeth. And Dr. Goodacre, Charles Goodacre, in the late 2000s, he came out and he actually did that. And they did their proof of concept, through just basic stereolithography, showing that you could digitally set teeth and create a base and a tooth arrangement that was clinically correct. And that's the whole thing here is what we're doing. Why do we even go digital? It's like trying to learn how to do something with socks on your hand. If you know how to do it so well in the conventional sense, why do learning how to do it digital is one thing, but doing it well is another. So they proved that this could be done. And then we move forward to 2011 and in Scottsdale, Arizona for the ACP meeting. And this is when two companies came on the scene, Avident and Denka, and they introduced their digital dentures, is what we know as digital dentures today. Both different technologies in the most basic form of how they did things, but both digital products. Great solutions to the digital question of how am I going to make a denture? How am I going to create a removable prosthesis that is clinically correct, it's accurate, that's going to be functional in the patient's mouth, it's going to be comfortable and aesthetic. Those are the kinds of questions that you have when you go digital, because the technicians and the clinicians out there have done such a good job over the years, and they're artists. They do a very good job of creating these beautiful prostheses. And how are we ever going to do that digitally is the question. You talk to a denturist who's very proud of their work, or a lab technician, or a dentist who does his own work, and they're going, there's no way, digitally, we're ever going to be able to do what I can do with my hands. Well, we're getting a lot better, and we're getting really close. Okay, we're going to talk about at the end of the presentation today about what a premium digital denture is. But today's digital denture, what defines that digital denture? Well, is it the software, or is it the equipment? There's a lot of both, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about those. And you talk about all the different companies now from 2011 till today, and this is just a few of them. These companies have come on board, and they've introduced digital denture solutions. And they're growing every day. There's more. There's different partnerships, different technologies coming on, and it's just growing so fast. So you're going, oh my gosh, if I've never done this, how in the world am I going to choose? Maybe you didn't even know that there are this many companies in existence that made digital dentures, but there really are, or products they offer that product offerings. So is it the materials? It's just, we talked about the software. Could it be the materials? We're going to talk tonight about the different options. You have milled options. We have printed. We have milled and printed. We have milled and bonded. We have monolithic. What's monolithic mean? We have completely printed dentures, 100% printed dentures, which is kind of what everybody's talking about nowadays. We have combinations of the two, milled and printed and printed and printed. I'm talking about milled bases and printed teeth, or printed bases and printed teeth. So there's so many choices out there that constitute that digital denture. So what are the advantages of digital dentures? Obviously, efficiency, accuracy, repeatability, predictability. Affordable? I put a question mark there. Depending on what system you get into, it could be a little pricey. If you get into a milling system, mills are not cheap, but the materials right now are really good. So as we talk about that later, you'll understand what I'm saying. But most of the time, if you're printing already in your office or your laboratory, you can really easily adapt a technology, a software, and create a digital denture for a relatively low amount of resources. I'm talking about time and money. So the question mark stays there for affordability, but it really can be. There are disadvantages. There's a learning curve. Okay, there's a learning curve to the software. It's not, with the new generation coming up now that is digitally minded, it's changing. At the last, when we first started doing this 12 years ago, it was tough to get somebody to even pick up a mouse and think they could deliver or design a denture with a mouse, but it's changed. So with all the other softwares and all the other technologies, crown and bridge and removable or orthodontics and partials and splints and aligners. There's so many software packages out there now, and people are learning to do 3D rendering, understand conceptually what 3D is. But there is a learning curve. I talked about the cost can be a disadvantage. The digital dental technicians, are they being trained? Had a conversation with one of the biggest, it's probably the biggest training group in the country a couple of days ago, and how they're struggling to put together effective but doing a good job with it. But they're still trying to find the best way to train digital technicians. How far can you train them? The softwares, they branch off so much. It's hard to focus on one thing and try to find somebody that knows a little bit about everything or is good about a lot of things. So those digitally trained technicians are going to be the standard of care down the road, but today they're not. It's hard enough to find technicians, period, dental technicians. A lot of clinicians are doing their own designs because of the simplicity of it. But, that is a concern, finding digital technicians that want to do that or that can make the change. This is changing. This limited software features, this is actually improving very, very fast. 3 years ago, this was a big problem. A lot of where the software is not really dedicated to digital dentures, where they were software packages that would do other things, and you kind of have to backdoor the digital denture design, or combine that with the inability to do certain things. The typical thing we'd hear in the old days, I'm talking 10 or 12 years ago, well, I can't do that how am I going to do that with with a mouse when I, can do it so perfectly with an instrument? But basically it's just a different tool. So people learning how to use what they know and apply those skills to the mouse, in a software program to be able to create the beautiful restorations that they're used to producing. There are a lot of choices. There's no doubt there's a lot of choices. And hopefully at the end of the night, I'm going to help you steer through a little bit of this and understand some of the big concepts that help us understand, where do we make our turn? Where do we focus? Because there are some pretty major turning points that you're going to face, and based on where you want to go, hopefully we can. The goal of tonight's presentation is to help you make, a clear choice on where to go and which direction to proceed. And the other disadvantage is the inability to bridge a gap. Some of the old timers can't do it. I've hired and trained veteran technicians who can't work a computer, and vice versa. I've hired gamers who can't learn teeth. So it's a fine line of where you're going to have your technicians, where you're going to locate your technicians. There are also multiple systems on the market. We quote, I put that open, the word systems in quotes and air quotes, because the systems could be proprietary systems, they could be open systems, different types of closed systems where they won't let you do anything. They make you purchase everything, or you can't export a file. There are milled options. There are 3D printed options. There's, is the entry cost a problem? The cost per arch. One thing about digital dentures is, even though we are going to be able to charge less for them with more time down the road, you have to be able to charge for them now. Don't be afraid as a technician to charge for your technology, charge for your expertise. Is your market, is your clientele willing to bear that cost? Are the clinicians able to pass that cost on? Sometimes the answer to that question is no, depending on where you are geographically, or you just can't do that. So, you got to make sure that you get what you deserve for that arch, that price per arch. And when after this is all said and done, after you've made your investment into capital equipment and all the time and energy, are you going to get a return on your investment? So with that all said, you have a lot of choices out there, and this is what we don't want you to face. We want you, by the end of the night, hopefully your decision will be more like this, where you can have a clear path. At least this is the direction I want to go. This is what I want to pursue. You may already have technology in your practice or your office, your lab, and that you can build on. And that makes your life so much easier. So we'll talk about a lot of things in the next half hour, and hopefully it'll make this decision clear. So bridging the gap, and this whole idea from conventional to digital it's pretty, in my mind, it's a pretty deep thing, because it's personal to a lot of people. What are we trying to accomplish? Because it's not a matter of leaving your fundamentals and your basics behind, because everything that we do from here on out digitally is based on the fundamentals of dentistry. Obviously, it is. The biology does not change, okay? And we have to understand, you still have to understand the principles of making a denture to be able to create a digital denture that is going to be correct and successful. What do we want to do? What do we need to do? Is it because we're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, or do we really want to do it? Do we have the need for it? Do we have the demand to do it? And if that question is yes, then why? Why do we want to do it? So these are just some little philosophical questions I'm throwing out there. Do we? I'm saying yes, absolutely. I think 100%. Go for it. Get into digital because it is the way of the future. Anybody will tell you that. Article I just read in the magazine IDT that came out today that digital is here. It's not going anywhere. There's a magazine. There's an industry dedicated to it. So it's here to stay. So my decision is yes, but you need to ask yourself, why do you want to do it? So is the change going to be too hard? Is that transition from conventional to digital going to be difficult? What do I have to leave behind? I say nothing. This is above my door in my home office, and I love this. I love engineering. I love bridges. And if you look at the Marin County abutment, this is the Golden Gate Bridge on one side of the picture, and you have the San Francisco abutment on the other. These are two strong, important structures that have to be there to make this bridge work. And obviously, metaphorically speaking, we're talking to get from one side to the other. You need to take with you what you learned, bring it with you to across, and make sure that you benefit from all that wisdom and knowledge. So it's how do we build your bridge? That's the question here. So how do you ensure success with digital dentures? And here we're going to start talking about some concepts compared to the conventional process. And this is hopefully where you'll be able to start having a few light bulbs go off in your head that, wow, this isn't all that different, okay? Because it really isn't. And it gets very basic. We get really granular here, and it really becomes a simple process. So the conventional process, as we all know, it starts with an impression. We start with a set of models. Casts, we do a wax rim. We'll try that in. We'll make adjustments. We'll do a full wax up. We make some revisions, we invest that, we process the denture. Depending on the accuracy of the process that we'll be getting, there are different levels of quality on the processing. We get a denture, we get a conventional denture. And there are talented folks out there that do just wonderful jobs at doing this, and there are jobs that aren't as good, okay, with dentures. And we have to deal with all those. And as clinicians, we have to fix those. As technicians, we have to reline them. We have to, the whole idea of a reline most of the time is not so much the patient, but it's the bad denture. So, those are the things that we have to consider in the conventional process. Hopefully, in your conventional process, you're taking care in your record making, and you're taking care in your processing to avoid a lot of those mistakes that are easily achieved or superseded through the digital process. And generally, you're talking about 5-day appointments. You're talking about coming back and trying things in and making adjustments, hot wax next to the chair. And there's nothing wrong with these processes. In fact, these are very fundamental in what we're going to be doing digitally. But the simple fact is you got more chair time, you got patient's time, and it just takes more time and effort, which means money. Now, the digital workflow is quite similar. Okay, we start with a digital scan. The digital scanning technology right now, the intraoral scanning is phenomenal. It's coming along so fast. Just last year, it was the IPS symposium. There were two great presentations there on digital or intraoral impressioning, and that technology's here. There have been a lot of reservations about how good it can be. At the end of the day, it really is how good the clinician can make those scans, but it's totally doable. Okay, the technology's here and it's getting better as far as using intraoral scans. These scans are just imported into the software. Simply, there's no stone, there's no impression material, there's nothing. However, you can still go physical, but you have to become digital. So we take a final impression, a set of casts, and we digitize those. We scan those. All right, and we make them digital, and then we bring them into a software, and we create a design, and you can have a try-in if you like. A lot of folks want that try-in because they want that security. I can tell you, 3 to 4 times, with a good record and success, you're going to get away from that try-in because you won't have to pay for it. B, you're going to have confidence in your own record making that you can make a good digital denture and save that time. Okay, and what I mean here is that you can go from 5 to 8 visits down to 2 to 3 appointments. Okay, if you can actually go to a 2 appointment. When I first got involved with this game 12 years ago, we were going for a crown and bridge type appointment. We were going for a 2 appointment denture, and where you'd have the patient in, you'd make the records, you'd have them in, make the design, do a virtual try-in, so you could send them a preview of the case and the setup so they could look at it, and then you take it to manufacturing and deliver it. You're gone. So it can be done, and I've seen many clinicians change over to that process, and it's a wonderful thing to see that happen. But it can happen. But everything you see here is based on the fundamental principles of the conventional denture. So how do we ensure that success with the digital denture? Okay, how are we going to build that bridge? Well, this is what I propose. It's going to be the systems. Talking about the workflow, you're going to have the systems. The records are important. What is, the software, the computer-aided design software, that's the CAD part, and the CAM is how you're going to manufacture it. Then understanding the materials. And then once you understand these 5 aspects of the digital denture workflow, hopefully you can make a clear choice on which direction you want to go. You may already have some of these processes in your business, okay? If you do, great. If not, it's time to start looking at those. So let's look at the first one here, of the flow of the digital denture workflow. We're going to look at the systems, and I said earlier how this is in air quotes. So you've got, and I'm going to put it in 4 columns here. First, you have the 3Shape group. Okay, these are companies that have based their design on 3Shape software. Incredible software, and by good reason, these folks have joined that bandwagon and have a very good, solid design software behind their digital denture production. You also have Exocad, okay, and they have partnerships. Then you have the standalones, like Dentsply Sirona. They have their system. It's a closed system that, for all the Sirona users, it's a great system. It designs dentures, and you'll be happy with it. Then you have kind of the I call it the proprietaries, okay, those who do their own thing, those who have dedicated denture softwares, and that's Sirona software too. But these are more open systems where you can export design files for a fee. Very inexpensive software programs like Denka is free. I mean, it's free. It's a free software. Blue Sky Bio software is free. They charge you for the export. So different approaches to the software, getting into the software, but still very viable, dedicated digital denture options. And then over here, finally, you have Evident, who are kind of the closed system. They do all the design, they keep it internal, they manufacture the denture and send it to you. So across the board, depending on where you want to be, if you're already a 3Shape or an Exocad customer, then by all means, you've already got over the hill of the big part of that expense. Just add on the denture module to it, because we're going to talk about those in a second, but that's the simple way to go, because it's going to be a lot less than getting into it from scratch. If you want to get into an open system, you could spend a little bit of money or none and get into one of the proprietary systems. If you're a Sirona customer, same thing, add on to their system. So there are different ways to jump in here that are all equally effective. So this is my takeaway for the lesson, or my takeaway lesson for the night, I'm going to say. Okay, even though we're trying to make a clear choice, at the end of the day, it's all about the records. All right. And we offer, actually, I give a 2-part course where I dig really deep into the weeds on this subject of digital dentures in 2 parts. And I talk a lot about the software and the design. But at the end of the day, it's not about the software, the design, or the materials. It's really all about the records. And we talk a lot about record making. And that's what I want you to understand, because those basics we talk about, those fundamentals, have to be understood. Because if you can make a successful and an accurate record, you're going to make an accurate, successful digital denture every time. And that's a promise. Okay, it's not an idle thing. I'm very serious about that. But you have to take serious, the records. What does it mean to make a digital record that is going to be digitally successful? And we're going to call it the critical components to ensure your success. First off, you need an accurate final impression. That's a must. If you don't know how to make a final impression that is accurate, go find out how to do it. There are lots of groups that do it, that teach final impression making. We're talking border molding, we're talking functional movement, things like that. Though that's very important. The whole point of doing a digital denture is you want to have the digital fit. And if you don't have an accurate impression, you're not going to get a good fit. We can't be doing alginates, because you can't scan alginates. Well, I back up. There's alginate alternatives that you can use to scan, but and don't get me wrong, alginate dentures are very accurate. Okay, but as far as what you need to do to get them scanned and get them into the digital system, it could be a disadvantage of what you're trying to do. So learn how to make digital impressions, or impressions that can be digitized and correct. So whether that be a PVS or whatever material you like to use, make sure it's accurate. That's my soapbox speech on impressions. And then you have the interocclusal record, and the interocclusal record has to do with the midline, the incisal edge, lip support, tooth size, and gingival height, and the horizontal plane of occlusion. If you can get these 6 aspects correct, these 6 critical components into your record, your interocclusal record, you can call your first appointment your try-in appointment. You can make that interocclusal record your try-in, because really all you're doing is you're verifying aesthetics. You're verifying these things chairside with the patient in the mouth or in the chair, the records in their mouth. You're verifying these things, and as long as they're correct, you're going to have a successful outcome. All right. So let's talk about impressions really quick. So we talked about the different types of impressions. We have, PVS, we have polyether, we have custom trays. You can use border molding wax. I don't really care what you use, as long as it's accurate. It's because impressions vary. And there are lots of great techniques. As long as it's accurate is what's important. Now let's talk about the interocclusal record. Again, there's lots of different types of interocclusal records, from wax rims to full wax ups to try-ins. We have duplicate dentures. I love the duplicate denture technique. I think that's very reliable. It's very easy to do, the reference denture technique. In a single arch, same thing. You can do reference dentures. If a patient walks in with their existing denture and they say, hey, my teeth are worn out, but it fits okay, then just make a bite, create a bite with that, an interocclusal bite, scan it, give the denture back to them, and tell the lab what you want to do different with it. It's pretty simple. It's a beautiful thing. But make sure whatever you do with these is ensure that your centric's correct, your vertical's correct. Make sure that you're recording the information that we need, because if your bite is off, okay, digitally, it's going to be off in the insertion, and you're going to be upset. So take the extra time to confirm that CR and that vertical is correct. Set your vertical first, then based on that vertical, set your centric and get a good bite. Because if it's off a millimeter or it's shifted one way or the other, forward or back, it's going to be off, okay, and you're not going to be happy. This is very critical. So make sure that that's something that you take care in doing. There are lots of record-making systems out there. And what I would like to say about these is really quick. I mean, you've got, for example, you have the centric trays from Ivoclar, which are great techniques. You have the AMD from Avident. You've got the Denka trays. You've got the BD keys from Baltic. These are all great systems, and they all work very well. But a word of advice, if you don't know how to use these, be cautious, because they're not magic denture kits, okay? Remember that. You still have to understand the principles behind what you're doing, okay? If you understand the principles, these devices work very well in your hands, okay? But if you don't, take some time to understand what you're doing and then learn how to do it, because they can serve. So what somebody asked me, well, what kind of record should I give you? What kind of, what should I do? And I tell them, do what you do best. Just give me what you do best, what you understand the best, what you feel the most comfortable with. You make that record for me, and you make sure that it's got all these these critical components in it, and I'll make you a digital denture. And that's my promise. That's my promise to my customers, because that's really the fact. Don't make it harder on them. Don't push them into a system like this unless they want it. There are a lot of advanced general practitioners out there and prosthodontists who love this, but then you think about a lot of dentists coming out of dental school don't even know what a Gothic arch tracer is. Okay, so why get them into something that is something that's going to screw them up and cause them grief if you don't have to? So if the wax rim is the way to go, then go for it. So again, just be careful of these because they're great instruments and they all work very well, but be cautious. Again, it's all about the accuracy of the record. I don't care what it is, as long as it's right. So the data acquisition, doesn't matter really how you acquire the information, as long as, again, it's accurate. As it's accurate, then it's scanned correctly. So now you can scan something. You may have a perfect record and you get a poor scan, and it could affect your outcome. Okay, so all these softwares have features where you can confirm, how accurate your scans are. Okay, well, I shouldn't say all. Most of them, for the most part, have the ability, have tools where you can confirm, and you can see if you're working from a physical to a digital. You can actually see where something could be off, where the scan could be off. Because another problem with scans is that when you're scanning things in pieces, is usually you're going to need 3 pieces. You're going to need an upper, a lower, and a bite scan. Okay, depending on the quality of the scanner, okay, and the scan file. When you're registering those data files, those triangles have to be able to find common ground. They have to find matching data, and the less data that's matching, when you're trying to create when you're trying to put 2 scans together into one, if those scans are not good, you're going to have variation. You're going to have deviation, error, and that can also affect your final outcome. So these softwares come with features that you can measure the accuracy of the registrations. Pay close attention to that. Look at color maps. Look for splotchiness. Look for that blotchy look when you're trying to register files together. So at the end of the day, we're scanning, and we want to be able to capture what the record is. We want to bring it into a software package like we see here. So here we see a wax rim that's been brought into just the reshape. And we're going to be able to start identifying those, and those are the different companies that are involved with those again. But you want to start applying. We're going to start looking at landmarks, and we're going to look at the fundamental landmarks, and we identify the midline, the incisal edge, and things that we would normally do in the real world, and then we set the teeth to that. Okay, and if it's all in the record, we can compare it to the record and create an accurate digital setup. So here's an example of the Sirona software, where you've got a wax rim, you have a midline, you have an incisal edge, you've got canine marks, you've got a posterior plane of occlusion. Everything we need is in here. There's probably a final impression in that upper and lower tissue, and basically everything's right there. So now what we're doing is we're going to use the fundamental principles of making dentures and identify landmarks, and then we can actually overlay that record, that interocclusal record, to our setup, and then we can start putting teeth in there based on those aesthetics. Okay, this is where it starts making sense. It's like, wow, I'm really starting to make the connection from where I was with my wax up or where I was with my wax rim, and now I've got teeth there, and you've got a setup, and now you've got the different softwares that have facial, the ability to put in pictures and images of the face and lips, and it's just incredible what you can do. So really, you can do a virtual try-in very easily. And then you have your proposals, and then you have a final denture. So here's a couple of examples. This is a carbon denture. There's a carbon denture that was done as a duplicate denture technique, and the denture was duplicated with PMMA, and the record was scanned, and it was designed and printed with a carbon Dentsply Lucitone 3D print material. And this case went in with with no adjustments. And I know that really sounds oversimplified, but I know this doctor, and I followed this case, and it went in with no adjustments. Why is that? Because this doctor has done a lot of digital dentures. She's very comfortable with making records. She knows what she needs to do chairside. She knows how to communicate that to the lab, to the software, and that information has been translated into the final digital denture. Here's another case. This was an Evotion case. This is actually a bonded Ivoclar case. Is also done in 3Shape. Same doctor, and again, very good record, no adjustments. So these are 2-appointment dentures. Very successful, very profitable. They make you feel good at the end of the day, because they really make you feel like you're doing something that's different, that's digital, that's innovative, and it's saving yourself some time. Denka is one of the original companies that launched back in 2011, and they've got this is an example. So again, we're not going through all the systems. I'm giving some examples. This is a great proprietary software that's free. You can download it for free, and you can design all the dentures you want. But again, what are we looking for? We're looking for the simple landmarks, the fundamental landmarks, midlines, the size ledges, horizontal planes. And you go through their software setup process, and you have a proposal. You can see where the reference needs to be, where the teeth need to go, and you have a beautiful digital denture created. It's a pretty great process. Another example of a proprietary system is the Baltic denture system. Again, a software designed for digital dentures. Here you see, I remember I mentioned earlier the splotchiness. This is what you want to see when you want to see a good registration. This is a reference denture and the setup, and you can see that we've actually matched very, very nicely. When you see that blotchiness, that's a very close registration. Okay, so this is what you want to see when you're registering your files. But the message with the Baltic is that, again, you're using fundamental principles. You're identifying traditional landmarks, as you always have done, your vestibules, your tuberosities, your size of papilla. The question always remains in the digital denture: do you need a postpalatal seal? Well, if the fit is correct, then you don't. Okay, that's been proven. You get a proposal, and you have a final product. Okay. Another 2-appointment denture. Beautiful results. And finally, I'd just like to show you Avident. They have a proprietary system. They'll actually design the case for you. They've got a very advanced software program that pretty much can do anything that you need to in a denture design. They have multiple tooth libraries. They'll design it for you. They'll send you a preview, a digital preview, and you can approve it. You can recommend changes. But at the end of the day, you have a beautiful, fully milled premium digital denture based on the principles that we talked about. Now, I just want to talk really quickly. We're moving into the materials, but before we do that, I want to talk about the digital copy denture. Now, if there are any great moments of 2021, okay, I'm going to call it because we had some advances coming through 2020. But really, it's the advancement of materials and software now. So the 3Shape has come out with their new dental system 2021, and they've offered the ability to create a copy denture. Okay, and what this does, it really encapsulates what took some of the older software, the other softwares, a lot of time and effort, a lot of touch time to do. Now this is all done under the hood. It's done with a couple of clicks. And basically what happens is, and this is why this is important, is because it's becoming more automated. We're moving towards a one-click denture. And to be honest with you, with their 3Shape Automate software for the Crown and Bridge, they do have a one-click tooth now. So I'm sure that they're moving in a direction to do this with the dentures. But what it does basically, it'll take a scan of a denture, as you see up here, and it'll take that scan, and it basically differentiates the teeth from the base. It does a Boolean extraction, and it'll create you a tooth model, and it'll create you a base, and you can print those separate pieces, and you'll have your you'll have your digital denture. And that's a great breakthrough, okay, because we hadn't been able to do that for a long time. We've been able to get really close to it, but to actually be able to do that is something pretty extraordinary. And exocad's doing similar things right now, so you can do that with the exocad, their new 3.0 Galway software as well. So these softwares are coming along so fast with their capabilities that it's hard to keep up with what's, you know, what are the tools that I can put in my toolbox, okay? And it's through courses like this. Hopefully, we'll try to keep ahead of the game for you, so we can help you navigate this. But I tell you, the softwares are getting really, really good because, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, one of the biggest concerns in the early days was, well, you're never going to be able to do what I can do with an instrument. Well, now you can, okay? And we're able to create. Somebody walks in with that old shabby denture and they just need a revision, a rejuvenation of it. We can do that now, okay? And it's not too much trouble. So this is something to really consider. All right, let's take our last 15 minutes and talk about materials. So what makes a digital denture? Is it the materials? Is it milled? Is it monolithic? Is it milled base and milled teeth? Is it milled base and bonded teeth? Is it printed base and bonded teeth? Is it printed base and printed teeth? So there's so many choices here to have here, so many combinations. It's really infinite. Well, not infinite, but there's a lot of choices of where you can go with this. And where we're going with materials today is moving just as fast as the software is. And I'm going to explain why. If you were to ask me the question, what's the best way to make a digital denture? If you were to ask me that question 3 years ago, even 2 years, even 1 year ago, I would have told you a certain thing. And I'm going to tell you something else tonight that's a little bit different, but I tell you, things are changing. It's hard to pin me down on what's the best now because things are changing so much. But I want to talk about the difference between milling and printing because those are the two big, those are the two major avenues of manufacturing a digital denture right now. Both of them, you have accuracy, but there are aesthetic differences. Just 2 years ago, even a year ago, people would swear up and down, and especially in Europe, that the materials for printing are not as good as milled, and I'd agree with that. Okay, a milled denture is generally made out of a processed acrylic. That's a traditional acrylic that's got high material qualities, and it's going to be very aesthetic. And the printing material just is not there yet. Okay, that's a simple fact. It's not but it's getting really close. Okay, it's getting a lot better, and we're going to talk about that. There are strength differences, not so much though. Now, I could have said that 3 years ago. I would have said, don't even go down the road of printing because even the printing people were skeptical about it. You could go to a digital denture symposium and you couldn't get anybody to commit to the qualities of the materials that they were talking about. But that's changed now. That's not the same today as it was 3 years ago. There are bond strength differences. So if you go the bonding route where you're going to be bonding teeth, you need to understand the difference between bonding to a printed material versus bonding to a milled material. So let's talk about the accuracy first. I mean, it's stated and it's basically gospel now that we understand that CAD/CAM is better than any of the conventional processes. We can get really good, really close with some of the heat-cured processes, but it's still not as good as CAD/CAM. For the most part, it's one-to-one. In fact, the fit can be too good. In fact, I'm going to show you a study here in a second where printing is actually more accurate than milling if it's done correctly. So definitely digital outdoes the going from pressed to poured to injected to CAD/CAM is much better on the CAD/CAM side. Brian Goodacre did this study. This was a landmark study he did back in 2017-18 that showed the difference and the superiority of at that time milled bases, and then he compared milled bases to conventional bases, and you can tell the vast difference. Now, this is a study that was done in 2018, late 2018, that talked about the difference between milled bases and printed bases, showing that these on the bottom were actually printed bases that show more accuracy. Okay, but then you're talking about undercuts and things like that. So when you're talking about how accurate do you want it? We have to talk about the undercuts too, and you have to talk about paths of insertion, because you can get something that'll never go in a patient's mouth. I mean, that's simply stated. And the fact that the 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 uh, the techniques in printing, the post-cure processes, if those aren't done correctly and with much attention, you're going to have problems. So you can have distortion, but if it's done correctly, they can be hyper accurate. There are aesthetic differences. You have the milled bases, you have milled teeth, you have carded teeth. Here's an example of the Vita, the bionic base. Everybody knows the Vita teeth. They're gorgeous teeth. You can bond those digital teeth into a milled base that is traditional PMMA, and you're going to have a beautiful restoration. You can have it. You can choose an Avident. Same type of thing. You can choose they can mill their base, or they can do what's called the monolithic denture, as opposed to bonded like this is. The monolithic, these folks actually coined the term monolithic, and what that means simply is that you have your tooth and your base is one. Okay, and there are several companies now that offer this feature. You've got Evotion, through their processing technique, for all intents and purposes, is the same final product as this microscopically, and the same with Baltic, because the chemical interface between the base and the teeth is one. Okay, so there's not going to be a pop out, and so if you had to have a superior product, for strength and pop outs and things like that, then obviously you'd want to go something that's monolithic. But the choices are few, and then the problem is they're all milled right now. So if you're not going to go milled, then you're going to have to choose something different. Something other than monolithic. This is an example for the Baltic monolithic denture. And here's a great picture. This is a good image of showing that seamless chemical interface. This is all one. This is done in one process, and depending on the company that we mentioned before, they slightly differ in their processes, but the net result is the same. And there's, this tooth is going to shear off before it breaks out of the base. All right, the polishing abilities of your different materials. So you've got conventional up here, you've got subtractive manufacturing, additive manufacturing, and then something that's been glazed. And I want you to look down here. So this is the milled surface, is F. So that's pretty smooth, okay? And it's pretty equal to that of the conventional. You have a hard time finishing some of the printed materials. It's hard to get a good finish on those because they're not as dense. They're sometimes softer. They've been softer, not so much now. There's some new materials that are actually as good at meeting the ISO standard as the conventional products. But there is a difference, okay? If you've ever finished one or the other, you can tell the difference. And I'm just pointing that out to show you the difference. So when printing first came out back in 16 and 17, when it really started hitting the mainstream, the ISO standard being for flexural strength being about 65 megapascals, NextDent was pretty much there with their material, but everybody else was way above that. Okay, it didn't come anywhere near the IvaCAD base, for example, okay, or the IVA base. It's just not. There was no comparison, and so people were thinking, well, Jesus, this isn't strong enough, and it would fracture in your hand. It's something that something had to be considered, but times are changing, and materials are getting a lot better, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides. But really quick, I wanted to mention the bondability. So this is actually a bondability study that was done in 2019, where it shows the bondability in strength of a milled or a traditional base is much higher than that of the printed base down here. So that has to be considered, okay? They're improving on the materials and the bonding materials because pretty much it's just a PMMA polymerization in the post-curing process now, but you need to make sure that there's no contamination and that's done correctly to have a denture that's not going to have a pop out. The materials are vast. There's lots of different companies out there that are supplying printing resins right now, and they all have their benefits, different types of materials for different procedures, not only dentures, but bases and aligners and models and splints and everything. So there's so many things to choose from out there. So here's the example of the Lucitone, where they actually have the printed base. It's the Lucitone 3D print base, which is a great material. This rocked the market last year, 2 years ago, right before COVID. They came out with something that actually exceeded the ISO standard for strength, which was great. And it's been the standard of it's been the standard to beat up until now. So they have their digital teeth, their digital portrait teeth, and those are bonded in at the digital base. A great collaboration between carbon and Dentsply. You've got Formlabs where you want to print your teeth and your base. You can do the same thing here. So great materials, very established materials, and it's something that has to be looked at. And I did mention the carbon. This is the carbon process here with the carbon printer. So this is the other thing. So we had the software from 3Shape that came out, which enabled us to do a copy denture. And now the race is on for the better material. So this material came out. This is the material, the new material from EnvisionTech. That's their Flexera base and tooth, and it's actually 3 more times stronger than that of the Lucitone material in resistance to fracture, and I'll explain that here in a second. When you look at this chart, comparison chart here, your total work fracture is the total cumulative strain on a prosthesis, and that is literally 3 times stronger than that of anything from 199 on through to the strongest material that we know, and that's the Lucitone material right now. It's not a bad thing. It's the materials. This chart is to show how things are trending up. Okay, materials are improving on a daily basis. So the days of being not as strong are pretty much gone at this point. So the materials are there. Aesthetically, we have to consider: do we like the way that the printed materials look on the base? They cannot print layers yet, but that's coming very soon. The printing technologies on printing multiple colors and multiple layers is going to be the big game changer, and that's the horse race right now to try to get to that. And I know that that's being worked on, and when that happens, that's going to change everything. Okay, so it's something to think about. So is today's digital denture a premium digital denture? I made a comment earlier that 2 or 3 years ago I said, well, it's only going to be a milled final premium denture. Okay. I would say this. I'm just going to say this before we wrap up. Today, if you were to ask me what the best premium digital denture could be that's on the market, I would have to say, relating to materials, I would have to say definitely a milled monolithic denture is probably the best digital denture you can place in a person's mouth as far as aesthetics and strength and overall material qualities. Okay. But with what I just said about the printing materials having caught up with, for the most part, these materials, that's going to change really soon. Okay. The aesthetics are changing, and when that happens, when that becomes equal to the printed to the milled materials, then it's game on, because then there won't be any difference. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I print dentures and I mill dentures, and I love them both, and I think they're both equally viable. Okay, especially with the way materials are right now, and it's just a matter of time. The rate that things are changing is really exciting. So let's just go through a couple of printers. In closing, I'm gonna, if you want to go the printing route, then if you've already got a printer, then by all means jump into this with a printer that with the software that's compatible, with the technology level that you understand with your current printer, because then you've run the race already. Okay, you've gotten over most of the hurdles, especially on the capital expense. Okay, so by all means use the equipment that you have, multitask it. But there are many printers on the market today that are good printers. They're some of them are faster than others. They accuracy is a little bit, or not accuracy, but resolution is some better than some than others. But for the most part, all these have really caught up in it. And I wouldn't hang so much on the printers. I would rely more on worrying about the materials, because to me, it's more about the materials. Watch the evolution of materials. Now, granted, some of those materials are going to be only proprietary through certain machines, but focus on the materials. And there's just a couple. I mean, I pretty much just went through most of the big printers on the market. There are a lot of. Now, if you want to go to the milling route, this is a more expensive route. But if you're already milling, if you're milling zirconia or milling titanium, by all means, this is a great option. You can pick up discs for little, okay, as far as the cost of them. And there are multi loading mills now that you can load your mill up with 12 discs and let it go overnight and just let it go. You're not there, and that's a huge advantage to let your machine run when you're not there. But if you want to get into a mill, it's definitely there for you to do, because there are some great mills out there. There are some mills that are dedicated just to milling digital dentures, and there are some that are multi-purpose, that are all great machines. So with that, I asked the question, how are you going to build your bridge? Hopefully we've talked enough about the materials, the software, the different approaches to making a digital denture to help you understand at least now, this is the direction I'm going to start to steer, okay? And the other thing I wanted you to bring across that bridge was understanding, I do need to have those basics, those fundamentals with me in the digital world. You can't forget it. It's not, these aren't magic dentures, okay? They're not going to create themselves. They still need to be based on sound and fundamental principles. But if you do that, and again, what did I tell you the biggest thing was? If you make sure that the record is accurate, and remember that it's all about the record, I promise you're going to have success in digital dentures. Digital is so much fun. It's exciting. It's fast moving. It keeps you young. And I challenge you, if you haven't done it yet, to get into it, especially with digital dentures, because it's here to stay. The train's moving down the track, and it's time to get on. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for spending an hour with me and with us tonight. It's been a big group of us. And if you have any questions now, I'd be glad to take them. Okay, the first question here I'm going to read is there any movement towards a standard file format for digitally designed restoration prosthesis, obviating the need for export file translation? That's a great question. I would say yes, definitely. Doing it for free is another thing, because most people are going to have to make their money, because all these milling companies are going to have to try to figure out how to still make some money. The companies that are involved in milling, they're going to have to probably charge something. But the file for printing is basically is an STL file. Now, if you're milling, you have to convert that with a CAM software, which is something we didn't talk about tonight, which is what we talk about in one of our other courses. I do see. Well, I'm going to say this: the process to get to a millable, easily millable file is becoming easier and easier. I mean, or in other words, the internal processes are becoming a lot easier. So it's becoming, they're building a lot better things under the hood, so to speak. So if something is going to be standardized, I would say yes, they need to be. So that output STL file can be used however you want to. Why can't you just scan the mouth instead of making models to scan? You can absolutely just scan the mouth. The intraoral scanning methods right now are very promising. There are a few landmark studies. If you'd like to email me, I'd be glad to send those to you. That are very promising. The proof of concept is past. We're doing it now. There was some early concern on tissue loading, and whether it was going to be a mucostatic type impression or, the tissue loading is important, but the scanning that's being done now is very promising, and it's being used widely. How do you take a digital impression in the case of severe resorption, resorbed rib with a lot of flabby tissue? That's a loaded question. I'm going to have to defer to my clinical colleagues for that one. The study I just mentioned actually talks about that. There is some skill involved there. I'm not going to say the word tricks. It's just some familiarity with how to scan the material, and there's be some blocking out, things like that. But it's a little bit more challenging. I never said it was easy, but that's one of the outlier situations. Which do you prefer for beginners? I would say this. I think that if you were to go to Blue Sky Bio and you were to go to Denka or you were to go to Baltic, each one of those softwares you can play with for free, and they're very intuitive, pull yourself through type softwares, because they're designed to be denture softwares, and they're very basic. They're very forgiving, and I would definitely recommend one of those because you can actually practice as much as you want to with those before you have to actually pay for an output file. So the beginner, I would try one of those, because again, I mentioned that earlier, that the softwares that were dedicated for digital dentures generally pull you through. They've got wizards, the design wizards, that help you through the steps, and they help you. They basically tell you what to do step by step. Looks like we have time for about one more question here. I'd like to talk about lab fees. One of the questions was about lab fees. All I can say there is, I mentioned that we need to be able to charge, lab technicians need to be able to charge for their technology, for their capital expense, for their work, okay? But the price on printed dentures is coming way down quick. I know that you can get digital dentures, printed digital dentures for $150 now, but what they're doing is, they're printing them with not as good materials, and they're giving you 2 or 3 of them because they're basically throwaway dentures. So, they one denture, gets stained or something happens to it, and they put another one in. So, but on the other hand, I've seen digital dentures, printed digital dentures, and milled, catching premium prices. So, I mean, it's across the board. You can go from 150 up to 300, $300 plus an arch. So, it just depends on what the technology is. All right. Well, that takes us to the end of our time. I would love to. There's some questions I didn't get to. I can answer those offline, but I appreciate your time tonight. It's been good to be with you. Thanks for choosing to spend your Thursday evening with us, and hope to see you soon talking about digital dentures. Take care.